Welcome to our new series, The 200 Movie Challenge. Our goal this year is to watch 200 movies that we haven't seen yet. If you want to listen to the full podcast where this clip is from, the link will be in the description. Now enjoy today's movie.
I remember hearing about this at the beginning of the year, and I could not see it because I don't remember what streaming services it was on then. And unfortunately, I didn't put it down a list, and I totally forgot about it until it was staring me in the face. And it is a horror theme, but it's a documentary. So I saw, and I kind of teased this last week, anyways, but I did see George A. Romero's Resident Evil. Came out in 2025. Now,
Interesting.
for people who don't know, there's going to be a lot to this. And by that, I mean, this is about George Romero. He had the rights first to make a Resident Evil movie. So actually, let me rephrase that. Constantine Films had the rights first, and they hired George Romero to make a script for this movie. And this is like late 90s. So this is before the Paul W.S. Anderson crap films came out. Or, you know what? I mean, I'm not going to say they're crap. They're just not Resident Evil. Especially the first one. Then they threw because when we played the games, and, I'm going to have to get into the games anyway. So we wanted that. So anyhow, this documentary first kind of goes into George Romero's history. Obviously, Night of the Living Dead. He basically created the whole idea of the zombie, and a little bit, what he did, how he got into films, Dawn of the Dead, and all, basically the Dead series, and how then it goes into the second part, which I didn't mind that. I'm like, okay, I like George Romero. I like zombie films. And then it goes into Resident Evil, how the games came about, how it was this huge success, how a lot of them did not even think this was going to be a successful franchise. How first it was made, Biohazard, obviously, out there in the East before it came our way. And they weren't even sure. And the fact that I think it sold 1 million copies in Japan, like the first week, kind of shocked them. And that's when they knew they had this franchise in hand. And I know you know this, Soto. I love the Resident Evil series. One of the very few series where pretty much I will probably day one purchase any of them. I know Resident Evil 9's coming out in February. Yeah, I want to know where they're going. And I just get into lore. As bad and as cheesy, I don't care where it goes. I'm like, I have fun with it, and that's what a game should be. Entertaining. I know you get scared. I
do.
So this documentary goes into a lot of the Resident Evil, how the first game came about, how they went right in the second game, and how Constantine Films quickly grabbed the rights. And yes, they hired George Romero, and he created. Now, he never played the games. He knew nothing of them. He tried playing. He's just not a gamer. He actually had an assistant play through the games, get the important footage to him so he can kind of, make a decent screenplay first draft. And so he did, and he watched a lot of it, and so obviously nothing shot, as we know, nothing happened. So this is a lot of tales of what that script was going to be like, and why all this fell through. And so people working, but I think Capcom instantly nixed it when they saw George Romero's draft. Imagine that, Soto. George Romero, the creator. To me, the creator of basically what a zombie is, what the lore of a zombie is. Night of the Living Dead, just an all-time great director in that genre. People look up to him. He brings a lot of people. And he's first draft, and like, no. And the big reason, there's too much violence, too much blood. He tried. Now, there were some things they said he changed.
Really?
Yes. That is a very big thing, that the reason why this got canned. There were some choices,
Really?
because if I remember correctly, obviously we know Chris and Jill, the big two characters from Resident Evil game, and the
Barry.
stars. Well, yes, there is Barry, and there's Albert Wesker. And actually, this is narrated by the guy who did the voice of Albert Wesker in the first Resident Evil, which is kind of cool.
Don't open that door.
Well, yeah. So not that cheesy of lines, but. One thing was changed was Chris Redfield wasn't part of the stars, and he was dating Jill Valentine, so they kind of put in a little love interest in it, because he was just, I don't know, they messed around a little bit, just trying to figure out different ways how they got to but he put in the mansion, and he put in, there's a little bit more backstory, but the big thing is, yeah, he had the dogs, he had like even the snake, he had the spiders, he had a lot of these characters. The tyrant, there was a little bit more
What?
backstory with the T virus.
Interesting.
Yeah, so basically he got all these things in, and Capcom saw it and they just said no, and then obviously there's a lot of back and forth. Paul W.S. Anderson kind of he said, well, I see the movie more as a in the universe, just kind of, maybe not what the games are, just something very different. And I think that's why they went this route, because they're like, well, who wants to see something that people already know is going to happen? Because we play, you play the games, they want something different. And I think that's why Capcom went with him. And yeah, I think there's 5 films he did, live action films, and they bring in the characters, but it's never had that Resident Evil feel. And yeah, George, even before all that though, George Romero kept asking, hey, can we do this? Just basically, different things to try to get this movie made, because he loved the idea. He loved, the suspense of what the games did. And so he appreciated it. And it was just amazing, but Soto, how close we could have been to not just a George Romero Resident Evil, but almost as close to an authentic. Yes, there might have been some changes with the characters, but the mansion, the look, the feel, everything Resident Evil, it was just scary, suspenseful, and that's what the games were, and that's what the live action movies ended up being were not. They had like some computer thing, like none of this shit is scary. They gave us the dogs, yay. So yeah, it is. I will say, even though I'm kind of talking good about it, I don't know. I felt like I wanted more of what this movie would have been, and obviously they couldn't show more. The first half, maybe even was all about George Romero and Resident Evil, which again isn't a bad thing. I just wasn't. That's not what I came here for. I was more I know a lot of the Resident Evil history, so that was kind of boring to me. It was kind of recapping. I know a lot of George Romero. Again, so if you don't know, yes, it does fill you in. But for me personally, I was more curious about this script, and I wish they had more info of what it was outside of the fact that it just got blacklisted because it was too violent. And maybe it's just because you got to also think what the 90s were, because we were coming off the slashers of the 80s. It was a little bit more of a different feel. Supernatural things were becoming huge. Obviously we had The Ring, The Grudge, all that shit. And I know there was Scream, but even that, from what I remember, wasn't too bloody. Not to what the extent was this, because they said this would have been rated NC-17, his original script.
What?
Don't ask me. So, but again, I think I just got bored with it. They did have some interesting people that he worked with. Even James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd, talked a lot of Romero. They interviewed him. So I was like, that was a cool little Easter egg for me, because I know he's a big horror film guy. He has cinema, obviously more independent. So yeah, this isn't bad, Soto. I just don't think, I didn't know what to expect going in. And because I think I wanted more of what this movie could have been. But I didn't need me personally, I didn't need the history of Resident Evil, Romero, but that's because I know a lot of it, especially us being film buffs. We know what Romero meant, so it's like, okay, this part, and then finally getting the interesting part, then they kind of went back into Romero and his unfortunate passing and a lot of that stuff. So I think I wanted more of what this movie could have been, and I think that's what disappointed me. Out of anything. And documentaries are hard. And I've said this. I've actually watched now, I think maybe 4 total documentaries. I know I had Jim Henson, John Candy, the Nintendo one. But
you have.
I like Jim Henson, I would go back and watch. The Idea Man. I said it. It's very nostalgic, but it did a great job of just the history and that what he meant to me personally. Whereas this, I'm like, I have no need to go back. Anyone that is interested, see it, just see what could have been, just try and find it. But like I said, I knew too much information that I was like, I just wish there was more. I think more of what, why it fell apart outside of just too bloody. Maybe more of what the script could have been. I think more of that history. And again, I know because it's Hollywood. What if? That's a lot of it. So there's not a lot of information. So this was a love letter to George Romero. That's how I kind of felt to it. But it's not what I wanted. Okay. And I will leave it at that. Like I said, I don't want to say this was bad. I was interested in why, and I got the why, as much why as we could, and I think I felt like I just wanted more. So I'm looking, where do I rank this? So it is going to be, unfortunately, more in the bottom half. And this is just me personally. It's not going to fall too low. I will tell you, it is above the Ron Clark story. I know you always ask that.
The Ron Clark line. Nice.
It is above that, but not too far above it. Really so this is right now, because I just like the 2, and I think this is the cutoff because I was disappointed in Barb's Burgers. So this feels like a good spot. Number 53 is kind of where I'm going to go with this right now. Because again, for me personally, I think I just expected something different out of this.
Yeah.
And if you don't know much about George Romero, or if you want to learn about Resident Evil, go ahead, check this out. I just knew a lot about it, and there wasn't as much about that, why it happened. But I would have sort of just the fact that it was violent and bloody, and he was sticking as much to the game. Like, this is one of the biggest what ifs, because I've said it, like the Paul Anderson ones are just shit. There's cartoon movies, the animated Resident Evils. I will tell you this, anyone see those. Those are amazing. Those are well done. They're entertaining. They know what they are. They bring in a lot of the classic characters, and it's a fun watch.